I'm Juan Angel. I'm head of marketing here at Fantom, and I'm really excited to be the MC for today's presentation. As most of you probably know, if you use the Fantom ecosystem, it's most known for its rich and diverse set of protocols and communities that operate on it. And with that being said, I'd like to start with Michael Cass-Kennedy, head security, and sorry, I already messed it up. Owen Palmer, head business development at SpookySwap, decentralized exchange on Fantom.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. I am really happy to be here. I guess first thing I want to say is that nothing I say here is going to be financial advice or anything like that. So, firstly, I want to take you back to, I guess I can't move around here. First, I want to take you back to April of 2021. So a little more than a year ago. And there was this thing called Fantom. And it had been around for a while. Mainnet had been around for a while. And there were a lot of users that had Fantom tokens. And there was something missing. It was missing something. It was missing a native decentralized exchange. Our team at SpookySwap came together and they saw this opportunity. They saw this wonderful chain with so many users on it. It's really fast. It's really cheap. But it's missing something. It's missing this AMM. So we developed SpookySwap. Some of you might be familiar with it. It's right now I would say it's the premier DEX on Fantom. Let me grab my slides here. Before I move on to this, I want to say a few things. So when the team came up with SpookySwap, they had 3 goals in mind. They wanted to make the best user experience in crypto. They wanted to focus on volume rather than TVL. Typically, a decentralized exchange focuses on TVL. Like we were accruing a lot of TVL, and we wanted to do something a little different. We wanted to see if we focused on volume, would there be something different about it? Would it be maybe more successful? And the last thing we wanted to focus on was decentralization. It was really important for the SpookySwap team to be a truly decentralized exchange. It was something we really, really wanted to focus on. So with those 3 goals in mind, we come a year later to April of 2022, and that's our anniversary. And we did a report to kind of review how Spooky had done. How was it after a year? So here I have some highlights. And the first thing I want to talk about before I get into those highlights is on that first thing is on the user experience. I've talked to so many people over the last couple of days, and it's been wonderful. I've gone to a lot of events and I run into people. They see my badge and they're like, "Oh, you're with SpookySwap." And I love to talk to these people because they really enjoyed using our exchange. They loved the user interface. It drew them in. It was something different. It worked really well, and that was something we really focused on. We're a Uni v2 fork, just like a lot of exchanges out there, but we focused on making this front end special, and we did some things. We tweaked the front end to make it faster, and that was something people found. They're like, "Hey, if we use your exchange, it's just fast. It just works really well." So we did some additional features. We added something called expert trading mode, where you could flip this mode and suddenly you have kind of like a centralized exchange experience. We added a bridge. Now there's this bridge, most of you might know, it's called multi-chain. When I first tried to use it, I played around with it. And I'm like, it just wasn't fun. It's not a fun experience to use. And we put this front end overlayer over multi-chain, and it's just easy. It just makes sense. So that was another thing we did to try to focus on the user experience. So that was a real key component of ours, and I think we succeeded with that. I think we succeeded because a number up here is for Q1 of 2022. We had 122,000 users, which is pretty awesome. We had 19,000 pairs added. So that means 19,000. There's people that are creating liquidity pairs on our exchange, 19,000 pairs. So that brings me to the next point, which is volume. So we focused on volume, and one thing we did to do that is we lowered our fees. Now typically the fees are 0.2%. Well, no, typically they're 0.3%. A lot of exchanges do 0.3. So we focused, well, let's do a lower fee. So we did 0.2%. And I think that was a big factor in our volume, increasing the volume. So if you look at our volume here, there were times where we did $1 billion in a week. That was pretty common. We were consistently the top 5 DEX in all of crypto. So you would have guys like Uniswap, PancakeSwap, SushiSwap, and then there's SpookySwap. It would show up. There was a day when I was at Bitcoin Miami. I would always introduce myself. I'd be, hey, I'm Owen with SpookySwap, and we're the number 3 DEX in crypto. That was something people still make a joke about that. On that day, we were the number 3 DEX by volume. But typically, we're in the top 5, and we have been in the top 5. So I think we succeeded in that. I think we showed that we could do volume, right? We did a lot of volume. So the third component, as I said, was decentralization. So I want to go to the next slide. So something we did is we really focused on decentralization, and part of that is if you look at the number of pairs we created. Those 19,000 pairs were completely permissionless. Someone can use us. They don't have to have our permission. They can put their pair on there and people can start trading, right? So another thing we did is we really focused on governance. So if you look right here, we had 75 governance proposals. Now compare that. Everyone knows what Uniswap is, right? We had almost twice as many, right? You have SushiSwap there with only 25. So it was really important to us for decisions by our DAO that it was done in a decentralized manner. We tried to use governance. Another thing we're really proud of, which is not on here, is that we were the very first DEX to have decentralized buybacks. So if you know what a buyback is, we have a governance token that we use our governance for, and part of the trade fees go back to buying that governance token, and that is completely decentralized. Anyone can do that. We don't control it. So that was another thing we did to try to be decentralized, and I think that was something that we've succeeded at, right? So if you look at it, our user experience is something that I think we succeeded at. Our volume, we definitely had a lot of volume, of course on Fantom, it's been great. And third is the decentralization. So those are the 3 things that we focused on as a DEX, and I think we succeeded on that. But that brings me one other thing, and that comes to what was happening to me yesterday when I was talking, not just yesterday, the last couple of days. When I talk to people that use SpookySwap, is did we succeed in building a community? And I don't know if that was we had that in mind when it was first, when SpookySwap was first started, but did we succeed in building a community? And that brings me to our NFT line, the Magic Hats. So we launched this NFT line in October of last year, and it sold out in 5 minutes. So obviously there was demand, there were 5,000 of them. We had over 1 million Fantom in total volume. We had the highest 7-day volume of any NFT on Fantom. So I think we were successful, at least in running this NFT line. And we've been working really hard on this project to do something special with NFTs. I know a lot of people think of NFTs if they're just JPEGs. And I think everyone wants to see something go beyond that. They want to see NFTs come into real usage, have some kind of usage. And so we tried to do something for our NFTs to make them a little different. And we had, it was actually ended up being quite difficult. We put 2 developers on it for months, and it was difficult with the math. But we finally figured it out, and starting on Monday, we're going to have Magic Hat staking. So you'll be able to stake your Magic Hats in order to get partner tokens. So we're really happy that that's finally been done, and that is coming on Monday. So we're really happy about that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Now, I just wanted to say that I love talking to our users. I've been so busy at this conference. I feel bad that I haven't got to talk to some people. And please feel free, if you see me around, grab me, and I'd love to talk about SpookySwap. I have some special stickers if anyone wants one. It's funny. SpookySwap's my first crypto job. I had never worked there before. I ended up being a Fantom maxi. Fantom was one of the very first crypto blockchains I ever traded on. The very first exchange I ever used was SpookySwap. And I talked to a lot of protocols over the months leading up to when I started working for SpookySwap, and I just loved the community. I loved how Fantom seemed to be different from other blockchains. It was really a community-driven chain, and I love the fact that SpookySwap tries to embody that. We try to be decentralized. We encourage everyone to take part in our Discord and our Telegram. I'm glad that I'm able to be here to represent them and talk to many of you. So please feel free to grab me and we'll talk. But with that said, I think we've succeeded. I'm really looking forward to what we're going to do in the future. We do have some plans. Devs always tell me never to give timelines, but we've been adding personnel. I think we still are looking for people. Feel free to reach out. And if you're a protocol that ever wants to engage with us, please reach out to me, and I'll happily talk with you. Okay? And with that, that's it. That's SpookySwap. So thanks, Trudy. Yeah, thanks so much.
So thanks for that, Owen. The takeaway for me is, never did I think that in my adult life I'd spend so much time looking at a screen trading numbers with numbers larger than my bank account that had a cat in a wizard's hat flying on a broom behind it. And I don't think many people expected SpookySwap to trend up to being in the top 5 in terms of trading volume out of all dexes. So that being said, never say never, and be careful with what you're betting against, because as you've seen on Fantom, things have happened and things are happening that most people wouldn't expect. That being said, I've kept Michael Cass-Kennedy on his toes the whole presentation, so now he's actually coming up. Please give it up for security engineer at ByteMasons Reaper Farm product.
How's everybody doing today? You all awake out there? You hot? I know I am. It's really hot in this, not gonna lie. So I'm Michael. I was honored to be selected to give this speech today, as I'm kind of one of the oldest out there, and well, I last more decades than most of my team members. I'm basically a dinosaur. So ever since the dawn of personal computers, there have been 2 concurrent races: the race to develop new technology and the race to present that technology in a manner that's digestible and appealing to the average user. There are thousands of dApps, most of them hard to use and using their own currency to run. We've got KYC, NFTs, CDP, EIPs, FBI, NSA, you name it. There's just ridiculous amount of acronyms out there. So how do we take this immensely powerful technology and package it in a form that's not only easy to use, but easy to understand? Our answer is abstraction. In theory, this is a simple thing to do. Take something that takes lots of actions, make fewer actions, right? However, approaching those issues of abstraction intelligently requires a lot more of a delicate approach. Sorry. So in order to get it into an easy to use but easy to understand, oh, sorry, lost my place. Make something that takes lots of actions take fewer actions, but approaching these issues of abstraction and intelligently requires a delicate approach. We're looking to simply make the lives of existing DeFi users and market participants easier, but looking to solve the problems that are impeding the adoption of the next 100 million users. At the Byte Masons, we ask the following: what is efficient to abstract? What is safe to abstract? And will this abstraction be constructive? Stuff that's easy and efficient to abstract is usually the best route, but removing the clicks on a user's journey and shortening that is not necessarily the only way to go. I mean, Reaper Farm itself is an abstraction built on top of DeFi protocols, able to boil complex investment strategies into simple and easy to use products. Our helper contracts facilitate safe, single-click entry and transfer between vaults. But things do get more complicated when talking about abstraction safety. This usually comes up when trying to reduce the cognitive load of a user's journey as opposed to the length reducing decision points opposed to clicks. Permissionless finance makes this especially difficult as they will most certainly affect the P&L. Drilling deeper into these questions, we can ask, could abstraction steer the user toward an incorrect decision? Could we even be injecting bias? Maybe there's legal implications, right? After we are qualified, or are we even qualified to make these decisions? From this is where our research comes in. Borrowing from postmodern portfolio theory, TradeFi risk assessment, and experience working in DeFi protocol design and security, we are developing a framework to programmatically assess asset risk that can be applied across protocols. We see object data-driven risk analysis as the cornerstone of an effective application design. Users can begin to guide themselves and make intelligent decisions based on information ingrained in the protocol. UX was really important consideration in our design for Reliquary, our upcoming financial NFT-powered protocol, which we built on, well, Fantom. Would there be anywhere else? What Reliquary does is quite simple. It represents a position in a liquidity pool as a composable NFT receipt that can either be redeemed for its underlying assets or traded on the market for a premium based on the maturity of its position. It's really amazing, actually. This is combined with the multi-reward system that offers much greater flexibility than MasterChef V2. Reliquary has potential to effectively grow ecosystems by unlocking billions of dollars currently locked away in farms, accounting for upwards of $3 of TVL per dollar. It's a massive amount of money. While also mitigating the multi-billion-dollar mercenary capital problem via its TradeFi-inspired maturity tranches. Of course, as impressive as these smart contract acrobats may be, they're no Cirque du Soleil. But it's only half the battle. The Byte Masons ethos is, after all, to make financial tools for the masses. That means this technology in all its innovative glory has to be accessible, as well as the abstraction comes in. That's where the abstraction comes in. By abstracting away the complexity of Reliquary through our simplified, easy to use, and fun UI, even the most inexperienced Web3 users can have access to competitive, sustainable yields. We look forward to revealing our innovative UX and continuing to build on these high-value verticals as part of our modular DeFi ecosystem. As I close this speech, I would like to leave you with one question. What does a multi-chain future look like, and how seamless would interaction be? I'd like to thank the Fantom Foundation for having me out here and everybody's time, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your conference.
So I don't know about you all, but it's clear that Michael's given more thought to scaling security in DeFi than I have to the meaning of life. So that helps me sleep at night, and I hope it helps all of you as well. Next up, we've got Pete Ho of Fiberblock's Tank Wars. Very fun play-to-earn game on Fantom. So come on up here, Pete.
Let's go, Pete!
We ship all the way from Vietnam. Hi, hello everyone. My name is Pete. We are from Fiberblock. We make a Tank Wars on Fantom, the first real game on Fantom actually. And for a little our backgrounds, I and my partner in Fiberblock, we are from invest in cryptocurrencies in 2013. We started with a mining farm in Vietnam with $20,000. And since then, we started investing, and we found out Fantom in 2018, and we missed the ICO actually. But we got a friend from Vietnam, and then we just invested Fantom because go through the white paper and technology, we believe this is the next big thing on the EVM compatible chain. That actually when we saw Andre speak with barefoot on the stage. And then and after that, we got a very good experience with the Fantom ecosystem, and we said, oh, there are no game at all in Fantom, and we and my friend got a team. At first, we only have 7 people, 2 designers and 1 game developers, and we started to develop Tangwas in November last year. And that's all my background from cryptocurrency and games. And here is some information about game. If you never play, you should try. Very hard to beat the AI we coding on the game. We have different gameplay modes, such as PvE. We already released that's season 1 of Tangwas. The PvP we ready, but in the developer mode right now. And also we have the World Boss Battle, Guild Wars, and Tank World Championship, and MOBA mod plays. And here is some stats we have for the tanks. Well, last couple of weeks I got the report from my developers that say we have total around 3,000 NFT tanks sale on our own marketplace. And we have 95 countries users that play in our games. Philippines around 5,400 people, American about 2,600, and the rest is other countries. And there one player on 200 tanks. Total users spend time on a game is 39,000 hours already. This is more than 4.5 years. And for that last 2 weeks, more than $1 million already done in the server without glitch up, hack, or anything else. So congrats to our dev. And here I have some another Tank World Season 2 coming out soon. We'll see by the end. I cannot say the timeline, but our estimate is by the end of the month. There's going to be a mobile version of Tank World. It's going to be iOS and Android. And also we develop our own metaverse on the Tank also. So we're going to release some news on our Twitter later this week after I get back. Thank you very much for your time.
Everyone's getting their tanks ready. Next, none of this would have been possible without, of course, the Fantom blockchain. So I'd like to bring up to the stage the man, the myth, the legend, Michael Kong, CEO of Fantom Foundation.
Hey everyone, so I'm Michael Kong, the CEO of Fantom Foundation, and you've heard a lot of people from the community speak at the moment, talk about the various applications they're building, and these are some of the biggest projects that have been on the Fantom ecosystem for quite a while now, and you've heard some of the stats, for example, from Tank Wars, from SpookySwap, and from others. And so for this presentation though, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the underlying technology. So what we've developed so far, what the Fantom platform actually is in terms of the technology, but also in terms of like what we're building in the short term, the medium term, and also the longer term future to do with our core development, but also with what's known as the middleware development, to do with how you execute smart contracts. So what is Fantom? Well, Fantom is a chain that provides sub-second finality, that is transactions confirmation. So on average right now, block times for Fantom are about 0.8 or 0.9 seconds, so they're actually under 1 second, and it's considered true finality. In other words, when you get 2/3 +1 of the total validating power of the network, then your transaction is final. It's complete, it's appended to the chain. You don't need to wait for subsequent block confirmations. It's not based on what's known as the longest chain rule. It's not based on any probabilistic means of achieving finality. It is definitely final. So we say that finality is deterministic, or it's true finality. It's fast, as I mentioned before. We're confirming blocks under 1 second, and a block is basically just a data structure that contains a whole bunch of transactions, and it's scalable, which I'll get into going forward, and also provably secure. It's EVM based, so it supports smart contract development on chains that are smart contracts that can compile on the Ethereum network. So the way that you write, compile, and deploy smart contracts on Ethereum pretty much works the same way as on Fantom. I mean, there's a few like minor differences, but on the whole, it's pretty similar, or very, very similar. And it's very energy inefficient because it operates on proof of stake. So one of the big advantages, in my opinion, of proof of stake over, say, proof of work is that transactions get, you don't need to like use a lot of like computational power in order to secure the network. It's more based on the stake of the validator nodes and the voting rounds that occur across the validator set in order to confirm transactions. It's also prunable as well, meaning that you can reduce the size of the chain data. And in fact, we've been able to reduce the size of the chain data by a factor of about 80 or 90%, which I'll get into a bit more detail of. So, as I mentioned before, it's EVM compatible. So right now, we use the same middleware or the same smart contract execution stack as on Ethereum, but we're actually in the process of changing over that technology or transitioning across that technology over a period of time. Because we've noticed in our research, and I have a background kind of in programming languages and virtual machine research, specifically to do with the EVM, back in 2016, 2017 at the University of Sydney. And even back then, we kind of identified some inefficiencies and some lack of security properties of the EVM. And that's something that we do definitely want to address. It's also, the code is also fully open source, so it's under the MIT license and also the GPL version 3 license for some of the code that we've imported from Ethereum in order to make the chain work. And it's also permissionless, so anybody can join and leave the network at any time. All nodes are treated equal. There's no gatekeeping. There's no way of people stopping other people from joining. There's none of that at all. So it truly is like an open network, kind of like how there's an open network with the internet. So in terms of security, it's kind of, the chain is secure in many ways. And there's never been like a double spend that's happened on chain. There's never been a hack of the chain itself. There's never been any funds that have been misplaced on the chain. And the chain has been fully operational for well over 2.5 years. And for more than a year, it has never gone offline, not even for a millisecond. It's always operated. So, thank you. And it really has to come down to the tech team. The people that actually built the chain originally was only about 4 people. And that kind of surprises, and I was not one of them. These are people way smarter than me. And so it kind of surprises people. People think that we're a team of 50 or 60 or 100 engineers to build the chain. In reality, it was initially just 4 people. Now the team is closer to about 7, and that's still 7 people that are building on the new benefits that are coming to the Fantom network. So it's really a credit to them for building the chain that we have at the moment. So as I mentioned before, it's proof of stake based. So in order to confirm a transaction, you need 2/3 plus 1 of the total validating power of the network, meaning conversely, to do a denial of service in the network, you do need 1/3 of the total validating power. So obviously, in order to attack the network, you have to get a whole bunch of stake, and you have to purchase that, and then you have to attack the network, which requires quite a bit of effort. So it's secured by proof of stake. The consensus is ABFT, meaning that it's asynchronous. Asynchronous processing of transactions is essentially how we get the high network throughput that we have at the moment. And asynchronous processing of transactions basically means that you can process multiple transactions at the same time. And kind of to like give an analogy, when you submit a transaction to the network, that transaction automatically gets added to what we call an event block, and that event block takes in that transaction plus the surrounding transactions around it. So that means that there's no waiting for like the next block to be mined. There's no waiting for subsequent blocks to be mined after that in order to confirm your transaction. As soon as you submit a transaction to the network, it already starts getting processed by the network. And while like one validator is processing that transaction and then passing it around, many other transactions are also being sent to the network to other validators and are being processed at the same time. So when you're able to process multiple transactions or multiple blocks simultaneously, rather than like one block at a time, like with a linear chain, such as with Bitcoin and Ethereum, it can be a lot faster. It's also what we call leaderless consensus, so there's no hierarchy of nodes. All nodes are treated equally on chain, so all nodes can participate equally in validation, and anybody can create a node anywhere around the world for whatever purpose they like in order to validate the network. And also, it's impossible to reorganize blocks in the past or to like fork the network, because if you try and fork the network, there's mechanisms in place where if you're seen as trying to fork the network, the network will label your validator as a cheater, and you get penalized for doing so. And so, I like to say that the Fantom network is pretty much like unforkable, and also there's no block reorgs. And block reorgs are like a serious problem, and you sometimes see them like Bitcoin and Ethereum. Like we saw it with Ethereum about 2 weeks ago, and with the block reorg, like 7 blocks got reorganized before. And this is kind of a big problem, and this is a problem that should never really be able to happen in blockchains, because ledgers are supposed to be immutable, right? They're supposed to be finalized. So final is supposed to be final. It's not supposed to be like you think your transaction finalized and then it gets reorganized somehow like later in the future. So this is a very important property that Fantom has. And just going through the core architecture, there's really like 3 components to it. There's a base layer, so that's how you like process transactions and kind of get the final ordering of transactions across all nodes in the network. There's the middleware layer, which is basically how you execute smart contracts. And I'll be talking about some of the research and development we're doing in that space. And on top of that, you've got the application layer. So you've got different applications being built on the Fantom network. For example, like SpookySwap, the #1 DEX on the platform by quite a mile. Tank Wars, which is a game on the network. And there are other games and other DEXs and other like what we call decentralized applications on the network, and they kind of sit on the application layer, as well as with a variety of different technologies, like API calls, and a variety of different services that allow application developers to communicate to the rest of the technology stack. So in terms of the middleware, as I mentioned before, it's EVM compatible. So if you know how to build a Solidity smart contract or a Viper smart contract, you can compile it using the standard like SolC compiler or Solidity compiler into the machine readable code and basically deploy it out on the Fantom network. So right now with the Fantom technology stack, the only difference in that previous slide that I showed you about the 3 stacks is really the consensus. So the consensus is completely different from the way that, say, Bitcoin, Ethereum works, and other like layer 1 chains work. However, we do want to transition this technology, but right now, if you're an Ethereum developer, you basically already know how to deploy in Fantom. So for any Ethereum or smart contract developers out there, I really, request that you guys deploy in the Fantom network, have a look at the technology for yourselves, how it performs, the low cost, the fast finality, the reliability, and really just give it a go is all I'm basically saying here. You don't necessarily have to take my word for it as to like how it all works. So now for like the future research and development that's taking place. And there's some new stuff in here over the past couple of weeks and I haven't really told many people about. So some of this stuff will be a bit new. So in the short to the medium term, we basically have like 3 main technology upgrades. One is called, we recently did a major upgrade using implementing our version of what's known as SnapSync. So on Ethereum, you have this mode called SnapSync that allows you to basically like synchronize your nodes with other nodes on the network, or what we call other peers on the network, very, very fast in a fraction of the time than previously was possible. Technically speaking, it's quite different how we had to do it. We had to modify our existing consensus algorithm that we call lachesis to create a new consensus algorithm called lachesis-like repeater, or LLR. And this basically allows us to synchronize events and to make sure that the chain is completely, or the ledger is completely consistent across all nodes in the network after those events have been confirmed. So if the events have not yet been confirmed, you have to use our current consensus, but after the events have been confirmed, you can sync those events much, much faster in a fraction of the time. And I think, for example, on testnet, it might take you like over a day to sync the entire network from scratch. But with SnapSync, I think it was around 10 or 15 minutes. So it's a lot faster, and it can run continuously, so your nodes can keep staying in sync with the rest of the network. We also have upgrades with other things related to consensus, but not exactly about consensus. One of the interesting things about the Fantom blockchain is that our consensus is actually quite fast. And I was speaking to our CTO about a month ago, and he reckons that we could increase the performance or the network throughput of the chain by a factor of maybe 4 or even 5 if we were able to sort out other limitations around transaction performance. So when you're confirming a transaction, it's not just the speed of consensus, right? It's not just like how fast you can get agreement as to like the structure of the ledger. It also has to come down to a whole bunch of other different factors that go into transaction processing. And that, for example, includes like the way that the database works, right? So all nodes run a database that allows you to collect the data and to store the data on there, which is what a database is. And most Ethereum clients out there and other L1s use what's known as like level DB. And essentially, with another database we've experimented with called PebbleDB, we kind of found by accident that we're able to reduce the memory usage of nodes by about 90%. And we already have this technology running in production. We had to do, admittedly, a lot of modifications to get PebbleDB to be reliable because it kept crashing before and there were some like inconsistencies with the data. But we think we're very confident we've sorted out those issues, and we're actually have been running those in production nodes on our own systems for the past like month or so. And I think next week or the week after, we're gonna do an early alpha release. So anybody running like API or read-only nodes out there could be able to use them. And then later on, we'll get them to adapt, we'll get them to be used by validator nodes as well. So in the end, all nodes will be able to benefit from this technology. We've also been implementing a database called Aragon. This is a hybrid kind of like flat storage model that will allow us to basically confirm transactions, confirm blocks or the transactions before the new technology is deployed on what I call the flat storage. So in terms of core development, we've got a few things down the line. We've got auto pruning as well. So when your node is running, you'll be able to confirm transactions. You'll be able to like continuously like reduce a lot of the data size of the chain on a continuous basis. Right now, you have to like take the node offline in order to prune your node, but this method will allow you to do it while your node continues to run. And so that's basically ready in production. We're just doing some more testing. We're also implementing a new way of doing proof of stake with what's known as StareDAG. So in terms of peer selection, we found a way to kind of do it in constant time rather than logarithmic time. And we also got and we're also exploring about sharding ideas, which is quite a difficult problem. And I don't really have much time, so I just go through my final slide, or my second final slide very quickly. We're also working on a lot of like middleware development that's going on. So we're changing the middleware stack, the way that we execute our contracts. First, we're doing that by profiling the network. So we've created unique software that allows us to basically analyze the performance of smart contracts in the past on-chain from the very beginning of time to the current state of the network. And that's what we're in the process of doing right now. We're also building our own unique flat storage solution. So this is a technology that will be even more superior than, say, Aragon's security as to like how you read and write data on-chain. But unfortunately, that won't be backward compatible because you have to do a bunch of different changes. And it's not backward compatible. But going forward into the future in processing smart contracts, you'll be able to use this new flat storage system. And in the past, you'll be able to use what's known as Aragon, which is which is one of these read and write clients that exists on Ethereum and also Binance Smart Chain. And finally, we're also developing our own virtual machine. So this virtual machine will be a bit more efficient than the Ethereum virtual machine, but more importantly, it will allow you to do a whole bunch of security checking on the fly. So right now, with Ethereum, there's no security checking at the virtual machine level. With this technology, you'll be able to do security checking via what's known as symbolic execution, or executing in the pathways of your smart contracts in order to verify that your smart contract will actually execute as intended. And finally, we are hiring out there, in particular, more core and middleware developers to kind of work on the technology that I've just kind of like described. And so if any of you are interested in working in the space and are really passionate about it, or you know someone who might be interested in working at Fantom on those specific roles, I really would like to talk to you guys, because it's hard to find these sorts of developers. It's very niche, it's very technical, and you need to work with people who absolutely love that technology and are kind of like obsessed by it, which maybe I am a bit as well. And so, yeah, just feel free to reach out to me on my email address at mk@fantom.foundation. And thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Michael. Staying up here, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so my takeaways from this presentation are, one, that the devs are definitely doing something. And two, when Michael humbly attributes a lot of this work to devs much smarter than him, I'm wondering where my place in that hierarchy is. With that being said, I'd like to bring up Sam Bond, founder of Foundry, to have a chat with Michael.
Good to see you again. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Michael, for that great overview of Fantom and everything coming in the future. It's very exciting. To start off, I wanted to touch on the aspect of governance proposals.
Yeah.
Currently, 90% quorum, 90% of stake tokens are required to reach quorum,
Yeah.
which has been posing a problem for passing a lot of decentralization proposals,
Yeah.
reaching only like 50 to 75%. Does the foundation have any sort of future plans to potentially lower this threshold?
Yeah, so we actually do have 3 smart contract developers that are right now focusing on being able to like automate a changing of the parameters when it comes to like executing governance proposals. So right now with governance, basically the way it works is you submit a proposal. It doesn't actually have to be a 90% threshold. I think it can be as low as like 55 to 90. But these are all indicative votes, so they don't actually like automatically change how the network operates or any of the network parameters. For example, like the minimum staking requirements for nodes, or like the minimum, or like like how many FTM you can stake on a particular, or you can delegate to a particular node, and like a whole bunch of other parameters. So what we're actually in the final stages of testing is actually implementing those governance changes that happen automatically. So we're just fixing one other issue around how we actually automatically execute changes to network parameters. And once we do that, basically when a vote takes place, and the minimum threshold will be 66% rather than 90%, as soon as you get enough agreement on that, and you have 66 participation of the staked FTM, then anybody can call a function which will automatically update the parameter, say to do with their special fee contract or other aspects of the network, by just calling a function. So anybody will be able to do that, and these are all going to be public functions.
That is amazing. Great innovation right there. Next up, I wanted to touch on, with gas fees dropping as they are, Fantom getting faster, cheaper, seems like a benefit for retail. Wondering about validators. Are there any future plans to increase incentives for other validators to join the network as gas continues to drop?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we do want to get more validators on the network. I think right now on the network we have about 70 validator nodes, and a lot of people like kind of like take issue with that, saying, "Oh, well, Fantom isn't really that decentralized because you only have 70 validator nodes." Like, there are some other considerations that need to be made. Like, one is about like, okay, who actually controls the 70 nodes behind it? Like, the vast majority of these nodes are community-owned nodes rather than like Fantom validator nodes. Whereas like, I think for other networks, it might be like a high proportion that are actually like run by a foundation or a few individuals by themselves. And also, for me, the question is not always about like, what level of decentralization is a good level of decentralization? I mean, in my opinion, if we get 200 to 300 validators on chain, that probably works pretty well. But what is, I think, more important is what are the economic incentives in order to encourage people to behave well on chain, right? And so, for example, with other networks out there that are often seen as like decentralized, like Bitcoin or Ethereum, right? The reality is that there's always a tendency towards centralization because of economies of scale. And so because of that economies of scale, you see like there's a lot of like mining that's concentrated in Bitcoin. You know, if you and I just started up like a Bitcoin node in our rooms, it would basically make no money, right? So there's no economic incentive to do it. So the only way you can do it in a profitable manner is to set up these large farms. Well, that limits how many people can actually participate in consensus. It's the same issue with Ethereum, and it is a similar issue in proof of stake in that, you know, you tend to have like more concentration of stake in a few nodes rather than like many nodes. And so for me, it's more about like the economic system you set up, such that there's not really an incentive for people to misbehave. Otherwise, they might lose a lot of money, whether it's like proof of work machinery or whether it's like proof of stake in terms of like owning the tokens themselves.
Thank you. That was a perfect explanation. So I know you were a little rushed through the end of your presentation there, but when I was reading through the slides last night, asynchronous sharing really caught my eye as like a huge technological innovation that you guys are starting. I don't know how much you're really allowed to touch on that, but I'd love to hear.
Which technology?
The asynchronous sharing.
All right, yeah.
If you could touch on that for a minute, I'd love to hear some more details.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I think there was actually a typo in the slides. It should be sharding. So I think the way that you kind of get to what we call like infinite scalability, or scalability to the extent that you have like hundreds of millions, if not like a billion users, kind of like to the same degree that we have on the internet. And I think ultimately, you know, blockchain technology will be used just as ubiquitously as the internet. I see no reason for it, so long as we solve some technology problems. So there are quite a few technology problems to solve, like I briefly talked about in the presentation. But the way that, in my opinion, you get to infinite scalability is by getting some form of sharding. And what I mean by sharding is right now, one of the disadvantages of a blockchain is that you have to confirm all transactions across all nodes in the network. And so if you kind of think about it like, just like logically, if you have to confirm one transaction on one database, that's obviously a lot more efficient than confirming that same transaction 50 times over across 50 other databases. The whole idea about sharding is getting that computation and kind of like not requiring all nodes in the network to confirm the transaction, but only parts of the network to confirm that transaction. And so if you can successfully set up a system like that, then you can simply add more and more nodes to your network and cater for more and more users. The difficulty is how do you actually still get the consistency across all of the nodes in the network and do it in a very fast and efficient manner? And this whole idea about sharding that a lot of blockchains have talked about is especially more difficult with Fantom, to be honest, because of the fact that we process these transactions asynchronously. So there's already like a lot of tricks, not really tricks, but all algorithms you have to follow in order to make sure that you have consistency across all nodes, considering there's no ordering with the transactions as they come into the network. With sharding, it's like an extra layer of difficulty, but that's kind of like our long-term solution, but it might be like, you know, it's like a 5 or 10-year journey. It's not something that's gonna happen, you know, next month or next year, to be honest, yeah.
It's a massive development change, so 5 years seems even too reasonable.
5 years is a very long time in this space, right? Yeah.
So recently we've been seeing a slight scare with the near liquidation of almost $50 million on Fantom with the little mini spiral down that we saw. One big downfall of that was the rising gas prices that spiked through the roof. And obviously that's not just a Fantom issue, that's any sort of chain could encounter a similar issue. Has the foundation been brainstorming any sort of ideas that could help mitigate those gas spikes if another massive liquidation like this were to happen?
Yeah, in actual fact, we've implemented a change recently with how gas is calculated in the network. So I think those of you that have used Fantom in the past month have probably noticed that the gas fees have dropped tremendously, right? So whereas like the G-way, which is the way that we measure gas, you know, might have been like 50 or 100 on average, or 200. Right now, it's probably like 10 or 5 or 20. And so it is like a lot more accurate in how it calculates gas at the moment. So that's one way that we've reduced gas fees. And the other way that you reduce gas fees is gas fees are basically the price of computation on the network, right? And it's the same kind of logic that applies to other L1s out there, including, say, Ethereum, which originally came up with the gas concept. And that is, the supply to the network is your network throughput, or how many transactions you can confirm per second on the network. And on the demand side is how many users want to submit transactions to the network at that particular time, and how much are they willing to pay to submit those transactions. So that's why you've seen on Ethereum, because it's not very scalable, because it uses this like linear confirmation of blocks, that you see that transaction costs easily are like a few dollars for a basic transaction, going up to hundreds of dollars, if not even $1,000 on some occasions. With Fantom, it's a fraction of the cost, but you still get these gas spikes. And for us, it's working on improving the network performance. So as I mentioned in my presentation, working on the new database, working on a new way of executing smart contracts, working on other things that will allow us to take advantage of like the fast consensus that we have. And all of those processes are all about improving the user experience, which is all about fast transactions, cheap transactions, and secure transactions. And it's always those three things that I repeatedly say in interviews, because that's ultimately what the technology is there to do. It's there for the user experience. It's not there just for fun. It's there for the user experience, because in the end, we're building for users.
Yeah. I have actually seen gas as low as 1 Gwei recently. So you guys, whatever you've been doing has been working very well. Looks like we've got time for about one more question. And while I had you here, I really wanted to touch on Tomb briefly. Yeah. Very curious what your opinion is on it. The community as a whole seems very split down the middle of whether or not it's just doing what it should be and adding liquidity to the Fantom ecosystem as more tokens get staked, or if it's really just diluting Fantom and hurting the cost, hurting retail investors.
I think with Tomb, the problem with Tomb is that the algorithmic model that it has right now, and there's been a lot of different experiments as to like how algorithmic like peg models work. Like obviously like Terra Luna is the most biggest example out there, but there are many other tokens that are trying to do it, and Tomb is one of them. I think for Tomb, what it needs to do is modify the way that it does, tries to do the pegging. So for example, like I mentioned multiple times that they need to have a bigger discount with like how T-bonds work, right? They really need to experiment with a different algorithmic model, because right now it's not working. I mean, if you go to the Tomb website, I think it's like 0.3, like 1 Tomb to FTM, and it's supposed to be exactly 1 or around 1. And so I think if they, are there other algorithmic models that might work out in the future? Possibly. I haven't seen any of them work really, whether it comes to a pegging against a stablecoin or pegging against FTM or whatever they might be. But if you experiment with different kinds, you're more likely to maybe find one that will allow you to get a closer to peg than like how it currently is operated right now.
All right, thank you so much. That was a great conversation.
Thanks so much, Sam. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you, Sam and Michael. That was a fascinating conversation. So one of the topics that I'm sure you've heard come around time and time again, whether you've been in the ecosystem, whether you've been listening for this entire conversation, is that Fantom is organic, it's grassroots, and it's grown that way. And if that's something we could bottle and sell, that the recipe, the art, whatever it is that has led to the point we are at today, I'm sure that's something a lot of other blockchain foundations and teams would be very happy to purchase. As an initial user myself of the Fantom blockchain and ecosystem, several names kept cropping up, almost like myths, legends that contributed to this sort of open source, decentralized, permissionless environment in terms of producing, generating, and putting out there tools that maybe weren't already available, but other developers needed to build. And one of those names that kept resurfacing when I first came into this space was Doublesharp. Now, I've had the pleasure of meeting this man in person, in real life, here for the first time at this conference. So I'd like to introduce Justin Silver, also known as Doublesharp.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Justin Silver, and as Juan mentioned, I go by Doublesharp. I have been a software engineer for a pretty long time now, both Web 1, Web 2, Web 3 stuff. I've had the opportunity to work with a few different blockchains over the years, and about a year ago, I was introduced to Fantom, and as an application developer, it really resonated with me because it was fast enough and responsive enough to make a pleasant user experience for people for a lot of the technical reasons that Michael was talking about, but then what that really translates to is more responsive UX for people. So it was a chain that I was really interested in developing on because it allowed for the type of applications that I wanted to build for people. And so I sort of joined the community as just a regular user and started sort of poking around and offering help wherever I could, using some of my previous experience with setting up servers to help people build RPC nodes or validators, and building tools and scripts to help people do the sort of operational stuff that they needed to do. And through that, I got connected to lots of different projects and ended up connecting with FTM Alerts. And so I also am an admin on that Discord and do a weekly podcast live stream. And so today I'm going to talk about some of the a little bit technical, but some of the interesting design patterns that I've used with a few different projects, and other projects on Fantom have also been using. And specifically around NFTs, because although I like art and am an artist, although maybe not a good one, I've just made art, a lot of my interest in NFTs is more of the concept of uniqueness and how you can use them in ways that are sort of leverage that uniqueness to do things with them that you can't necessarily do with other tokens or outside of blockchain. So one of those things that I've been playing around with is counterfactual deployments of contracts. And counterfactual basically means that something doesn't exist yet, but it will in the future. And as most of you probably know, an NFT at its core represents a unique ID on the blockchain that might point to something else, like an image or a contract or some sort of agreement or something like that. And so the way that this happens, it seems, when I first heard about this, it seemed really weird that you could deploy a contract to the blockchain that you knew the address that it was going to be deployed to. So you could predict it. It was a deterministic, predictable address, because from my experience, for the most part, when you deployed something using Solidity, you got an address that was a long string of letters and numbers and hex that you couldn't necessarily predict. And so with Create 2, which was an EIP introduced in 2019, it replaced the nonce, so an incrementing number that's used to create those contract deployments, that made it hard to know what the address would be, with a salt. So you can provide a key to the Create 2 function, and through that, because you're providing the same value every time, you can produce the same deployment address every time. And so the second part of what I've been playing around with this is another EIP, which basically just defines a contract standard, and that being the minimal proxy contract. And really what it represents is the minimal amount of code that you need to deploy to the blockchain to have a contract delegate all of its calls to another contract. And so what that basically ends up doing for you is it provides the cheapest way to deploy some code for someone to end up with a unique address that uses an implementation contract at a different address to actually handle all of the processing. And it makes a really compact, like I mentioned, cheap way to deploy that contract, so you get the functionality from the implementation contract at its own address in this minimal proxy. So the specific standards that you work with NFTs are ERC 721, which is the NFT standard that most people are familiar with, that a lot of the art projects and even non-art projects are based around. And then the other standard is ERC 1155, which is a multi-token standard that was developed a little bit after ERC 721. Like the name implies, you can define multiple tokens within the one contract, and it's a way that you can save gas by batching contracts and things, or transactions, transfers, things like that. But really, the most important thing is that it can be an NFT, and it similarly to ERC 721, can have a single unique ID that represents something, and that's really what makes it an NFT in this context. So the next sort of technical piece of this is that for a lot of these contracts, they're actually ephemeral. So they're both counterfactual in that they don't exist now. And even though they can exist in the future, they're not going to exist for very long. So for some of the considerations when using this pattern, part of it is security. And so by deploying this contract, having it do the functionality that you want it to do, and then calling self-destruct on the contract, you can actually remove the bytecode from the blockchain, make the storage inaccessible to other contracts, and therefore any assets that are stored at that location are going to be more secure. And the other sort of benefit you get there is if it's something that you only need to do once, anytime you remove storage from the blockchain, you get a little bit of the gas back. So by doing this within one transaction, you're able to execute your functionality, remove the bytecode. It's kind of friendly for the blockchain, doesn't add unnecessary bloat, and then you're also saving a little bit of gas with it. So, I just realized I was looking at the wrong screen, so I'm talking about the next one. So, this might make more sense now. So, this is a kind of a basic diagram of what I was just talking about. So up at the top is the circle represents a user with an NFT, a particular token ID, and then you have this factory contract that uses create2, and by that user passing in their token ID to this factory, it can use an implementation contract that it's deployed to another address, and then anytime a user submits their token ID to the contract to do something, it can create this new ephemeral minimal proxy contract, which is called instance X on my diagram. And that's what lets the user sort of route through that contract to do whatever they want to do, either in that storage space or make arbitrary calls to other contracts. And that arbitrary contract could be really anything, as arbitrary implies, but it could be a token, NFT, ERC20, some other protocol that it interacts with. And so a lot of this stuff is, it's kind of interesting technically, but the actual use cases, I think, are where it really starts making a little bit more sense. So through all of these different processes, by taking your NFT token ID and submitting it through this factory contract and deploying the minimal proxy, you've ended up with an address that you can use to abstract things. So you now have an abstraction layer between the user and whatever protocol they're interacting with. And so, as with a lot of Solidity code, OpenZeppelin provides a nice implementation contract for this, and it actually has both the minimal proxy and create2 wrapped up in one little contract called clones, and that lets you both predict the deployment address and then actually do that deployment through predict deterministic address and clone deterministic. And then I just threw up a little sort of simple contract of what like an implementation would be. And really all this does, I have two functions, main functions on it. One's called do something. The idea there is that it does something and then can call self-destruct within that same function. So when you call it through the factory, it'll automatically remove itself as soon as it's finished doing whatever it's doing. The other part is execute calls, which is much more sort of abstract and lets you send in any contract call to anywhere you want. You just construct it outside, pass it in, and because it could be multiple calls and you're expecting a return value, you would have to make multiple calls to get the data back and then remove the contract if that's what you wanted to do. And then this is the factory contract, and again, it's a lot of Solidity code and stuff, but most of this is actually comments explaining what's going on. The actual code necessary to do this is pretty small, and this is the factory contract that takes that token ID and creates the minimal proxy instance that lets you interact with it. And part of the way that I started using this particular pattern was because of phantom gas, and it sort of ended up being counterintuitive because this actually is a method for saving gas in a lot of situations, but it seemed to me that getting really creative with deploying lots of contracts and creating this whole abstraction layer was something that made sense on Fantom because it was like fractions of a cent or a cent to run the transaction. And if you're, like I mentioned, some of this, it can actually end up being cheaper. In some cases, it might be a little bit more expensive. So there are trade-offs between different ways of implementing it, but it might be worth paying a little bit more in gas for some of the other security and other features that you get. And like I mentioned, a lot of times it actually ends up being cheaper. And so basically what you're getting out of this is using your NFT ID as a key to access something else. And this is a sort of a slightly different example of another use case where I use this pattern, and that's for NFT royalties through the ERC 2981 standard. And so that only will let you pass a royalty payment to a single address per token ID. And if you wanted to do something like have your the royalty payment split up proportionally and sent to multiple people, you're going to have some sort of contract logic in place to do that. And that gets very expensive to deploy if you're talking about large NFT contracts and large collections. So this becomes a lot more efficient to use counterfactual addresses to say, if you're going to send a royalty payment, here's where you would send it. There's no contract there, but don't worry, like I can deploy a contract there later and withdraw the tokens or payments. And so with that, though, I also wanted to talk about a few of the actual real-world use cases for this on Fantom. Some of these are projects that I've worked on directly, and some of them are projects that I've just helped out with. First one I want to talk about is Mousepack, which is one of the earliest NFT projects on Fantom. There were a few that came before it, but I got to work on it, and we put together this collection. The whole idea originally was that we wanted to adhere to some of the NFT expectations that people had for them being immutable and things like that, but we also wanted to come up with a creative way for your NFT's avatar to be changed and customized over time. And where we ended up going with that was this new iteration called Mouse with Mouseware. And part of what we were playing around with too is the concept of an NFT being able to own other NFTs. And so I have another little diagram here, but basically the way that it works is using the pattern that I described earlier. It takes your mouse ID and uses that to create a wallet address for your NFT. There's another collection called Mouseware, and those are all of the different attributes that that go into creating the image for your PFP. And by storing those on chain, we can mint NFTs from all the different attributes, and then your Mouse NFT can own Mouseware NFTs in its wallet, and you can customize it, put them on, change how it looks all on chain. And it's kind of cool because if you transferred your NFT to somebody else, all of the associated tokens would go with it because it's a composable NFT. Another project that I've used this on is Portal Heads. It was a 10K PFP project. Haven't looked recently, but it had the most unique holders of any PFP project on Fantom. And so it also had a special royalty set up where the original mentors of the project get some portion of the royalty fees. And so using this pattern, we were able to, one, set up some of the royalty handlers, and then also created some extra lore for the project by using this to handle some of the minting. We wanted to be able to do mints for some of the existing holders and fund that mint, and then also be able to still transfer the royalty rights to them. But because we had to go through this crazy web of contracts to make that happen, using minimal proxies let us mint each NFT from a unique address that would then be associated with a specific royalty, so that when somebody purchased it on the secondary marketplace, the royalties would end up flowing to the correct place. So those are both art projects. The other sort of interesting thing that I've found with this is that it started off playing around with it largely in an art capacity, but then it sort of translated into a lot of financial NFTs as well. And so Revest Finance is one of the protocols on Fantom, and what they do is lock up financial assets behind an NFT. So it lets you create vesting schedules that are unlocked based on time, price, all sorts of different kinds of events. And by using these, they call them smart wallets, but they're basically minimal proxy deployments. They're able to take all of their vaulted tokens, and all of them are actually stored in separate address storage locations in the EVM. So if there ever were to be an exploit on their vault, not all of the tokens are stored in one place anymore. So even if you were to trick the system into thinking that you deposited more than you really should, you wouldn't actually be able to deposit it or withdraw any more than that, because all of them are stored in one place. And so they've actually started off doing this partially for security, and then ended up deploying it for all of their vault solutions, because they found that, and part of this is just due to the complex math of rebase tokens and how some rewards and emissions work. They were having to do all this extra logic in their vault contracts to track who owned what and where tokens should be deployed and all of that. And by using these minimal proxies, they were able to push all of that onto the underlying contracts, the underlying assets. So the token contracts themselves are tracking the rebase. They don't have to actually do any of that. So even though they're creating more contracts, they were able to reduce their gas costs by about 17%. And then PaintSwap is also using this. They're the premier marketplace on Fantom. And in their new V3 marketplace, they're introducing non-custodial sales. So in their V2, all sales are locked in their, or all NFTs for sale are locked in their contract. And then you have to transfer them to the contract and move them back if you want to remove it for sale. With this pattern, they're going to be creating NFT vaults. So there are still some situations where you want the NFT to be in custody when the sale is taking place, and that might be for financial NFTs because there's underlying financial assets that you don't want the user to be messing with, and a few other reasons. And even though they will have non-vaulted NFT sales going forward, the vaults are going to let you do things like be selling your NFT in a vaulted situation in custody, but if there were any airdrops or anything like that, those would go to your own smart wallet vault, and you'd be able to withdraw those. So, and it provides like a little bit more security in terms of separating all of the NFTs that you have for sale from all the NFTs that everyone else has for sale. The other nice benefit of this is that it ends up making the unique holder count a little bit more accurate, because right now it gets thrown off if there's NFTs for sale. They all end up on the same contract. So a fourth project that I've sort of been working on the side is a liquid staking solution, and sort of just been playing around with it a little bit on top of the native special fee contract, which is the staking contract for Fantom. And it's all based around user wallet EOAs. So if a user makes a stake that's tied to their wallet, the only way to let somebody else undelegate, for example, would be to share your private key, which is a bad idea. So by abstracting all of it behind minimal proxy addresses, using an NFT as a key to access that proxy, you're able to create a stake, for example, on Fantom using a proxy address that's accessed through an NFT. If I decide that I want to not have that stake position, I don't want to hold this reward-bearing NFT anymore, because it's an NFT, I'm able to transfer it to somebody else. And so it like I was mentioning earlier, provides an abstraction layer between native staking and the user wallet, so that it provides a little bit more liquid of a position. And then there's all sorts of other cool things that you can start doing, like integrations into the governance system, bribing and lobbying, and sort of tweaking how lots of all the things around Fantom staking can work. And lastly, I just kind of wanted, my goal here was to present this pattern, which I thought was pretty interesting. Hopefully it sparks some creative ideas of other ways that you can abstract protocols, tokens, interact with them in new ways, locking up VECRV tokens, for example, behind this. And just in case none of it was interesting, I also included a picture of my dog dressed up as a fortune teller, because she's cute. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
So Justin only had 15 minutes up here, but if you want to hear more about what he has to say or pictures of his dog, you can check him out on a show called Fantom Unchained, which is actually a perfect segue to the next group of speakers here. Fantom, as I've said several times today, has grown very organically. It's a grassroots community with real users and real engagement. And a lot of this comes down to the voices we've had in the ecosystem, the exposure they've given to the blockchain and the communities on it. And it would be impossible to deny the impact that FTM Alerts and his team have had on growing everything we have here today. So with that being said, I'd like to welcome up onto the stage Austin Rampt and his co-host, Crypto Clay.
Can you hear me?
Hey guys, are we on?
We are. Afternoon, everybody.
Cool.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for Consensus for putting on such an amazing conference. Hope everybody's enjoyed it. Today, we want to take you on a journey, a little bit different type of a presentation than we've had thus far. Taking you on the journey of what is a power user on Fantom, and how have we built, honestly, one of the most unique, I'm back.
All right.
One of the most unique communities that I've ever seen from an organic nature, and how is that kind of crafted and come together. So let's jump right in. So who are we? I'm Clay Kilgo. I am the co-host on Fantom Unchained. It is a podcast that we do every Thursday specific to the Fantom protocol, or Fantom blockchain, excuse me. This handsome gentleman next to me is Austin Rampt, co-founder of FTM Alerts. Some would joke and argue that he is the DeFi dad and the OG of the Fantom ecosystem, so thank you for that. Not true, apparently. But yeah, so we really focus heavily on the Fantom ecosystem and kind of all that's going on, and we've watched this community grow organically, and it's been really, really exciting. And so what makes Fantom unique, right? So uptime. So we've had a bunch of stress tests, and if you've been following along lately, we've had some very recently. But the Fantom blockchain has stayed online 100% of the time. So obviously that's great. Scalability. So the Lachesis consensus algorithm is Byzantine fault tolerant in testing. It's processed up to 300 transactions per second. Pretty dang good. Thanks to the DAG, the only verifiers and validators of transactions are nodes and not blocks. And so we have incredible speed on Fantom. If you've used it, then you'll notice kind of how fast it is. I think it brings users back repeatedly over and over again. And lastly, and I think very importantly, affordability. It matters for building, it matters for the user experience. Thanks to middleware upgrades along the way, SnapSync was probably the most recent one. We have some of the lowest gas of any Fantom, any layer 1 blockchain out in the ecosystem. And so that's really what makes Fantom unique. But wait a second, you've heard all this, and that is not why I'm here today. I am here to take you on a journey of the power user on Fantom and the community that we've built. So let's start that story. Let's kick it off. So a story of humble beginnings. I think we have to begin where every good story does, which is the beginning. So on January 1st of 2021, Fantom had 5,060 unique wallets across the chain. It was adding about 10 per day at this time. Fast forward 1 year, exactly 1 year, and there was 1.5 million unique wallets. At this point, it was averaging about 6,000 additional wallets a day. So it was really, really accelerating, and things were taking off. And kind of come up to today where we are right now. And I saw this actually, I did this 2 days ago, but as of today, there was 3.2 million unique wallets. And between January and now, there's actually one day that we added 20,000 wallets in a single day. And so, the growth has been, parabolic effectively, and the community has gotten stronger and deeper and just really, it's been incredible to be a part of and incredible to watch, and it's all organic, which is super cool. So I think that opens itself up to some questions. What has fueled this amazing growth, right? What's driving these power users on Fantom to not just come, but come and stay? And how has the intersection of incredible technology merged with protocol innovation and built these unique community bonds that we actually see? If you come around Fantom and you get to interact with any of the folks in this room, it's one of the most open, welcoming places I've ever been a part of. And I came from the Ethereum side, and it's just been a very unique, cool experience. So those three questions I think will be answered kind of in the core pillars of what I see as the answer to what I just asked to the room. So the first core pillar is innovation. And we're going to kind of get into all of these. But innovation, partnerships, and community bonds. And I think this is what's going to map back to that power user / community sort of just sentiment that we see on the Fantom blockchain. So jumping in, I'm going to go through the first two, innovation and partnerships, and I'm just going to walk you through a couple of tangible examples of some protocols and what they're building and have built that I think lead back to this power user experience. And so the first protocol, I'm just going to keep walking around. First protocol I want to spotlight is Beethoven X, one of my favorite protocols on Fantom. They are a next generation decentralized exchange. If folks in this room are not as familiar with kind of the DeFi ecosystem, I would liken them to going to Fidelity and buying a share of Tesla or something like that. But in this case, it's decentralized finance. You can do swaps, you can do trades, you can trade and buy crypto token assets on their platform. If you're familiar with Ethereum, they're very similar to like a Uniswap style of trading with some really, really unique differentiators that I'm going to point out that I think makes innovation, like it's pretty mind-blowing what they've done. And they're also in partnership with Balancer Labs. Balancer is a huge innovative DEX on Ethereum. So I think it provides a lot of credibility as to what they've done on Fantom has actually gotten the attention of Balancer. They're like, hey, let's team up, because we can really crush things together. And so that's kind of what Beethoven is as a protocol. So now let's talk about the innovation that they've brought. So they basically released kind of the first and only iteration on Fantom of this thing called a weighted pool. In this case, and I'm kind of blind, this one's called a late quartet. And effectively a weighted pool is the first time that this index fund style of assets has been kind of put together in a basket where you can diversify what you're investing in one pool. So in this case, it's USDC, Fantom, Bitcoin, and Ethereum. So you can get access to sort of the core, most premium assets in the crypto space all in one pool, but you don't have to bring them all to get in. You could bring a little bit of USDC, some Bitcoin, some Ethereum, and it'll evenly weight your investment across them all, similar to an index fund. So super cool, super innovative. And really the only place on Fantom that you're able to do this. So that was kind of the first round of innovation that they released. But it did not stop there. And so this idea of boosted pools. So we had weighted pools, the index style fund of investing, and then they took it a step further and made boosted pools. And this is where things get very, very interesting. There's a lot on this slide, so I would say just as I click, follow along with, I'll call them beats because that's their token. Follow along with the green beats and we'll walk through this together. And so the first one is they brought in the concept of weighted pools, right? Shocker. The 80-20 pool, which I absolutely love. So 80% Boo. Owen was up here earlier from SpookySwap, that is their token. 80% Boo, 20% Fantom. It's a great weighted pool. But that's not obviously the innovation because we already talked about that. But what is innovation is they've realized that when you have these liquidity pools, when you're a user that comes and provides liquidity, on average about 80 to 90% of that liquidity sits dormant in the pool every day. It doesn't earn you swap fees. It doesn't really have a purpose besides just having TVL on the platform. So what if we could take that liquidity and send it off to Yearn Finance and put it in a Yearn vault and have it compound interest over there and give it back to you as a staker. Now you've got compounding interest on compounding interest where they've actually sent this off and made use of this sort of dormant liquidity. It's a pretty amazing innovation, and boosted pools, I think, are probably the future of liquidity provision from a capital efficiency perspective, right? It's really incredible. And so that's the innovation part of boosted pools. So what's interesting here on our next green beat is you'll see it says BB Boo. We don't need to worry about kind of what the technical stuff is behind that, but what you notice is that there's a SpookySwap logo. And within the Fantom ecosystem, we see this incredibly symbiotic relationship amongst all the protocols that are there working together, kind of like I've never seen anywhere else. And so, for Boo, they have a token called Boo. You can stake it on their platform and get their governance token XBoo, and it's interest bearing. But it can't be traded, and it really can't be used to provide liquidity on other places. Well, these boosted pools create a way that you can actually take your XBoo, stake it with Beethoven into the farm, and increase your liquidity exposure and continue to earn interest. So pretty incredible uses of innovation plus partnership. All of this has led to more power users and greater community. Second protocol I want to spotlight is Liquid Driver. They are liquidity as a service, so they provide liquidity on demand to decentralized exchanges. I'll explain what that means on the next slide. But they attract liquidity, and then they drive that liquidity to the DEXs. And what that's going to do is make the DEXs more efficient in their trading. So you need liquidity to have really efficient swaps or to not have really high slippage. And so Liquid Driver actually attracts liquidity, drives it to their partners, and then incentivizes users, and I'll show you how. And so they're a governance token vacuum of Fantom blue chip protocols. And again, it'll make more sense. Just give me 1 second. So, as we continue on, so what's the innovation? So they have these liquidity mining farms. So they say, hey, Mr. User, come provide, a Lin Spirit liquidity on our platform, and we will give you Liquid Driver tokens in return. We're going to give you a higher APR than what Beethoven's going to give you for that same pair. And then you're going to start getting Liquid Driver. They then take that liquidity you provided and they put it on Beethoven, so there can be more efficient trading on the DEX. So they are liquidity on demand as a service, right? They're bringing that liquidity other places. So that was pretty cool innovation on Fantom. But wait a minute, who do we see up top? Who are the two people at the top of these pools? Beethoven X and SpookySwap. Lo and behold, here we are again. The same symbiotic relationship shared across the ecosystem like you really don't see in other places. And so you've got Liquid Driver incentivizing users to come earn yield. They're going to take the liquidity that's given and bring it back out to the ecosystem onto the DEX so that they can have more efficient trades and swaps. It's super unique, super cool. But if you're a user, well, why would I want the Liquid Driver token if I'm just going to get a ton of them and then they could get dumped on the market? Well, as I said, they're a blue chip token vacuum, right? So they take 90% of the revenue they earn and they put it back towards X Liquid Driver lockers. So if you take your Liquid Driver and you lock it up, then every day you're going to get an APR back in a basket of assets back to you as a locker. And that really drives these power users that are centered around the community. And so I'll kind of leave it here, but what I do want to say and cap it off is, in order to innovate, you have to disrupt. And in order to disrupt, you have to be able to create. And the Fantom technology is so fast and so affordable that these devs can create and innovate and break and disrupt and do all the crap you need to be able to have a really, really amazing, end product. And none of this would even matter if it wasn't for the community bonds that are formed around all of this and the unique nature of the organic way that we've done this. So Austin, I'll hand it over to you.
I'm so glad I let Clay take that part. Are we on?
Yeah. Here, do you want to click or go
Click
for
for
it?
me, would you?
All right.
I don't like slides, man. I was like 10 minutes ago, I was afraid I was going to get up here and my fly was going to be down.
I had to check mine out.
So there's like an abstract part to all this, right? Like we can build the best tech, the fastest car, but if you have nobody that's driving it, it doesn't really matter, right? It's just like cool toys. And so over the last 15 months that we've been doing FTM Alerts, at first I thought we were starting out as kind of like a show where we were going to support the Fantom network, and that's how we started. But what it grew into is like this large scale kind of case study on what it takes to build a community, right? And we've taken calls with a lot of different L1s and L2s just trying to like feel our way through what are other networks doing. And consistently they tell us the same thing. We're giving incentives to projects not for the projects, but because we want their community. We want their community to come. And more importantly, we want that community to stick. We want it to show up and stick, right? So what makes a community sticky? So let's define this real quick if we could. So I dug through a whole bunch of definitions, and I know I'm going to go over time, and I apologize to whoever is out there. A feeling of fellowship with others as a result of having common attitudes, interests, or goals. And the operative word here is feeling, right? Which is kind of weird because we're in this crypto world. Like Doublesharp is like one of my favorite humans, right? And did you see all those flow charts? I didn't get them. I didn't understand a single one, right? But that's kind of like, that's a real like left brain thing. When we're talking about feelings, we're over here, right? We're kind of in that other side of it. And so, oh, now I'm on, thank you. And so if we could go to,
You're over there.
yeah, no, could you click us to the next
Oh, yeah,
one?
of course.
Cool. So belonging is not merely a human desire, but rather a fundamental need. So we're in this world where If you would click to the next one, too. We have this huge problem, right? And here's the problem. I go make friends with people, and the only thing I know about them is that they're a picture of a frog smoking a cigar, and they refuse to tell me their real name, right? And if you've been around the crypto world for a while, you know that that's true. So we live in a pseudonymous world, so how do you take that and break that down and connect with them in a real way, right? And there's been a couple of ways that we've been able to do that at FTM Alerts. One of those, and I'll just kind of break down a couple of them for you. The first one is consistency. And so really what we're doing is we're starting to build relationships with people, and it's kind of a touchy thing. So every single week, Doublesharp mentioned it, we have a show that's called Fantom Unchained. We've done 40 episodes, and we essentially talk about the topics from the prior week in Fantom. Everyone knows you show up Thursday at noon, you're going to get our show, right? It's going to come on no matter what's going on with the market. You show up, you're going to get our show. The second thing is transparency, and this is where it gets a little bit weird because what we're really trying to do here is build trust with people, and I can't see their face, and I don't know their name, and I don't know who they are. So it's kind of a weird thing. Owen, you know. So what that means is, when I'm out here talking, I need you to believe that I'm telling you the truth. And that's kind of a tough thing, right? So there's little nuances within this. And the projects themselves do a really, really good job at building community. But what we're talking about is how do we keep that above, right? How does an L1, how does an entire network build a community? Because what happens in the projects is we get little fractions that split off, right? The final thing that I think is super important is access. So, and I'm not suggesting that, you know, people that leading a network give people access to them at all times. But what we do during the show is we put the comments up on the screen. Excuse me. And what that's essentially enabled us to do is get comments directly from the people on the show. They're going to come up there. Some of them are really, really crude. Some of them are, you know, probably shouldn't be on the screen. But it enables us to interact with them, right? And it gives people a personal feeling that they're actually a part of what we're doing. Now, I didn't really mean for FTM Alerts initially to kind of become such a voice for the Fantom network, but it did. And can you click the next one?
Of course.
All right, cool. So what do you get when you actually put all these together? And I'll finish with this because I know they're probably going to turn my mic off. So about a year and a half, no, maybe 2 years ago, my wife went to the theater with me, and we watched a movie called The Greatest Showman. Have you guys seen this? Anyone? Okay, I'm a sucker for a musical. And we go in there, and it's a story about P.T. Barnum, and you know, he's starting the circus, he's bringing people together, right? Outcasts, and I loved this movie so much. I left the movie, and I was compelled to tell other people about the movie because of the experience that I just had, right? They didn't have to pay me to do that. There was no marketing budget. They didn't have to do a thing. I went out and I was a mouthpiece for that movie because of the experience they just gave me. Now, 99% of this industry really, really wants community, but only 1% is really focusing on how do you get that? What does it take to do that? Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I have the answer to that. I have no idea. But I do think if we start asking these questions, we're going to get there. Thanks, guys. You done?
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm supposed to come up here and say thank you, but thank you. That's all. Enjoy.